What's up? Creative Community, Open Class Doodles, episode number 40. Yes, a little interesting anniversary that we're all celebrating together by looking into the future like we always do on a Monday. This is our gathering for the experts of future events and also all the beautiful creative minds out there. Welcome to the COACHMC studio. This is the place where we'll help you actors, creative heads, artists, entertainers, performers to really shape unique behavior deliveries to stand out in the audition room. No matter where the audition takes place, it's always about performing on your best levels in a remarkable way and communicating your ideas in an authentic manner. And today, Tactical Doodles for Success, Open Class Doodles, episode 40, we'll talk about the future and more exactly, we're trying to take a glimpse into what actually could be the future of our society and how creativity will be one of the keys. And we're going to prove that in today's shows to not only make a living, but to be a thriving part of that future society. So let's see what's cooking. Oh yeah, these are some claims today. Welcome everybody to Open Class Doodles. Welcome to the chat. Welcome to the Twitter crowd, Facebook crowd. Welcome here on YouTube. The COACHMC studio is live and direct for the 40th time. I'm really proud of this little milestone for this channel. We've been streaming quite constantly over here. Now we ramped up productions and we see us 3 times a week and just trying to, give you good entertainment, also a lot of good tools, of course, for your creative solutions and maybe also, inspirational, motivational stuff. We also have, hey, Rosita is on the chat as well. We have also a meditation playlist because I've been kind of asked recently how to find more focus, right? I see this, time after time kind of popping up as one of the, major factors of today's kind of creative process, like whether it's, people who are attending the program or people just, being part of the YouTube community. They're always asking, like, how is it, possible to achieve that type of focus, that type of constant, dedicated, committed, execution and repetition without getting, too distracted or without losing your drive. And one of the, the methods that I personally use is to find some sort of a ritual for yourself, a habit that you can repeat quite flawlessly, and where you find 15, 20, 30 minutes of your own space, of own quietness, of own stillness in this beautiful but very noisy planet sometimes, right? Because I feel like a lot of what we're discussing today also depends from us singularly. And you will see also by looking into the past how people predicted the future and what they saw coming and how that kind of deviated from their initial prophecies, right? Because of course, all is depending on us singularly, and we have a certain way to evolve that is not always predictable. Every single element on this planet kind of has his own story running, his own movie going, his own agenda that he's striving for. And I believe that by the extension of what we can achieve singularly, this is also what we can achieve as a collectively, only exponentially more. So to know where, hey, John, this whole trip can go potentially maybe helps us also what to go into directions that are just different, and therefore creating our own market share, our own space, our own ecosystem. And don't believe the doomsayers and all these prophets of apocalypse. They're always coming up. There's always a cycle of doomsayers and doomsayers and prophets of the apocalypse, showing up, and they will always tell you, it's all gonna end tomorrow. Don't believe that. Don't believe that. There is no such thing as a deadline. You know, it's a lifeline. It's always a lifeline. If it's a deadline, you know, we're not here anymore. So as long as we're alive, there's always a chance. There's always hope. There's always a possibility. And this is the great thing about the future. So never get too involved with the news, I suggest, right? Kind of look at it from a perspective that it has also a little bit of a healthy distance. And we're going to explore that and take a look at this very, you know, audacious claim, like how will the world look like in 2050? How is the future going to evolve? And where are we? Because currency, creativity, as is the currency, this is also meant as electrical charge, as power, as dynamic, right? As traction, not only as currency in terms of a financial value, but really like to be a driving force. It's current, it's electricity, it's voltage, it's tension. Okay. There was some in the beginning of the 20th century, I think, yeah, we need to go back a little bit because that kind of helps us to understand what the process is. Like, how do we even start to kind of address that thing, like called the future? Is where do we start? Of course, we always start from our field of expertise, and then we make educated guesses. You know, we kind of assume what could be the evolvement at a certain rate, at a certain pace, at a certain velocity, and what could be then the potential outcome of, you know, of future events, and what's gonna impact us as a society. And back in the days, I think it was in the beginning of the 20th century, like the 1920s, where after the Second World War, that was a major catastrophic, you know, event for the whole planet because so many countries were involved in it. It was the first planetary, you know, dispute, if you want to call it so. After the Second World War, of course, First World War, I'm sorry, in the 1920s, it ended in 1918 with the Peace Treaty of Versailles in Paris, and near Paris. And people looked into the future and said, hey, what's coming up? So that's a very interesting thing. It happened after a cataclysm. And actually, even further, if we go down the rabbit hole of history, you know, there's always been such a thing. Like, you need a cataclysm, you need a war, you need a dispute. All of a sudden, people wake up, and then they take, you know, they kind of take a stance and say, you know what, where I want to be in the future, right? Because when everything ends, you want to be prepared and at least like look back at your own life and say, okay, I've done something interesting. I've left a legacy, or it was worth living, or at least I'm okay with myself, or if, you know, whatever it is, you know, we are all, you know, fathers of our own success, and we're all related to these actions. So it's no wonder that this whole thing about predicting the future trends, kind of, you know, thinking about future societies, and also, you know, great humanistic conventions that took place, right? The abolishment of, let's say, monarchy per se, and institutionalizing the parliament and giving more power to the people, and then enlarging even that, and then giving more power to the female role as well, letting her vote and be part of society. So I think in the 20th century we can like safely say that was the beginning of this trend, of this culture, of this habit of looking into the future and making educated guesses about and predictions about what's about to happen. Yes. And Pat, this is really cool. I think between the world wars was the first time travel started opening up to the normal person. Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that. It has a lot to do like with what we're discussing today, getting to each other, communicating, reaching out to each other, traveling, all that, definitely. So just for, you know, the sake of today's show, it's a beautiful travel, you know, through the past to the future. And so therefore, you know, buckle up, everybody. So first of all, why is it important? Now, here, for example, we have an article by a very influential, you know, it's a very influential foundation called the Atlantic Council. These are like the World Economic Forum. They're think tanks. They are composed of people from universities, authors, writers, professors, politicians, and they're trying to kind of, envision what future trends may look like, and of course, kind of adjusting politics and trying to contribute and influence politics in a positive way. So we as a society will adapt softly to all the possibly also radical changes of the future. So we have this article here by Mary Kate Aylor, Peter Engelke, Uri Friedman, and Paul Kjelstra. All right. Picture a world with competing power centers. An unstable Russia stumbling into its post-Putin era, a nuclear-armed Iran emerging in the midst of an unruly nuclear age, and a United Nations incapable of carrying out its core functions, including convening the world's countries to tackle problems such as climate change that no one state can solve and pose a grave threat to global security and prosperity. Right, so here we have a clear painted picture about what the Atlantic Council will talk about and what they think is going to be the narrative for at least the next 10 years. Right, so they're talking about the UN, the role of the Middle Eastern country, and their nuclear arsenal. Always this nuclear arsenal. We always have this, thing. This is about the nuclear arsenal. That changes the power, of course. Yes, and these are global strategists. So they look at this from a global strategist perspective, right? It's finance, it's politics, it's geostrategy. Buonasera, and they look into the future and they say, that's just a glimpse into the future that leading global strategists and foresight practitioners forecast when the Atlantic Council's scuff crow for strategy and security surveyed them in November and how they expect the world to change over the next 10 years. So if this sketch leaves you gloomy, you're in good company. 60% of the experts who participated in our annual global foresight survey think the world will be worse off a decade hence. But despite the pessimism about the overall direction of global affairs that many express, their responses also turned up cause for hope when we asked more specific questions regarding geopolitics, the environment, disruptive technology, the global economy, and other domains. The 288 respondents were mostly citizens of the United States, 60% of those polled, with 17% from Europe and 11% from Latin America and the Caribbean. And total respondents' nationalities were spread across 48 countries. So that's very interesting. The survey is going to tackle, of course, more the Western world, and with sparkles of other countries that somehow are affiliated with that world, and what their assessment, their assumption of the future for the next 10 years will be, of course, with these issues these topics that were most crucial for them from their perspective. So respondents also work in a variety of fields, including the private sector, 27%, nonprofits, 18%, academic or educational institutions, 16%, government, 16%, independent consulting, 14%, and multilateral institutions, 4%. So that's a pretty good distribution. They are dispersed across age ranges as well, with 10% between here and so on and so forth. So what are the final results? They say the outlook for normal relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia remains positive, and a Palestinian state may be more likely than it seems. Fine. For them, this will give stability to the Middle Eastern sector, and in 2034, Israel will have nominated diplomatic relations. And we see all these statistics, these geopolitical, and strategic assessments, and the probabilities of them becoming reality. This is how people nowadays, from these great companies, these great consulting and strategic assessment firms, kind of tackle reality and our future. They look at geopolitics, they look at money, they look at potential herds of conflicts. They're looking at these polarized systems: China, Russia, Israel, Palestine, Iran, America. They look at all these dualities and try to kind of assess how they will they continue their relationship with the procedure of time. Interesting. Of course, when you see stuff like this, you feel like, okay, so is our future outlook always based on how politicians work out their affairs? Because if it would just be that, like we just presented, then you could definitely say, well, that's an easy prediction, right? We will just be more nurtured. We will have more stability. We will have more structure. We'll have more industry, and we're gonna, adapt to that. And as long as we adapt to that, the society will take care of us. But we are society, and we need to drive the cultural beat. We need to, make sure that the states are operating as a reflection of our will, and that we are not operating according to their meaning and function and what's most convenient for their affairs. They should adapt to what we think is most convenient for us as a population. And why did this start all in the 1920s after the First War? Because there was a group in Italy, the Futurists, and they thought of, creating some sort of a vision to say, hey, we need visions in order to survive. We need visions in order to proceed into the future. We need to come up with a philosophy. And if you really think about it, all these these political philosophies, whether that's socialism, Marxism, communism, anarchy, whatever it is, even democracy, the parliamentary democracy, all these visions on how to rule society, they are coming from this era. So this is interesting that now, 100 years later, we are assessing already based on a system that was created back then. Trade dictates future, for sure. And what dictates trade? Because if you have nothing to trade, what will you trade? How will you run commerce? What is the proposition that you have? Again, if you're looking at the Atlantic Council, it's pretty clear. You need to position yourself alongside those political ley lines. But if we look back how this whole movement actually started, and we see that the world is based on what they thought in the beginning of this 20th century, and that we evolved from there, and that there is no real reason for us to continue on that path. Because guess what? We have changed from that narrative. We are not that narrative anymore. We don't get defined by the things people were defined for and from 120 years ago. With all respect of all the beautiful inventions, all the great stuff, and the societies that kind of came to being through that period, but we are not the same people anymore. So again, fascinating visions of our present from over 100 years ago. We took a little glimpse into what the Atlantic Council believes to be 10 years of politics from now. Let's take a look at what people over 100 years ago believed we would be in right now. And let's compare that to each other. From domed cities to Victorian room bars, people had bold assumptions about how life would be today. From Christopher McFadden. This was published February 2021, but it's a pretty good article. And it's a pretty good article. It's not but, it's a... So, futurists and science fiction writers are masters of making a living from predicting the future. That is their job. That's why entertainment is so important, guys, right? I always say that. Entertainers, creators, artists, if you think about the futurists of Italy, these were all like artists. They were not hired by the state or the government in a think tank type of solution, what later on became a reality in Germany and Paris and London. In Italy, it was more like a spontaneous, of course, it was dictated by certain groups. Freemasons were involved in this and other groups as well. But it definitely was more, something coming really from various creative backgrounds, coming quite organically together under a certain rule of philosophy. Yes, for sure. Because after the First World War, people wanted to give that vision to the future of Europe to these countries that were devastated by the war. I mean, understand that in the trenches of Verdun, up there in North France, Germans and French people, they have slaughtered each other, like days and days of these trench fights without any sense. People lost their humanity, they say, right, in the First World War. Like our society sort of lost its virginity till then, yes, we had war, we had tribal affairs, we had also genocide, we had all sorts of bad things. Even concentration camps were built before the First World War. We had all sorts of atrocities, but the way this industrial type of, there's no other way, this industrial way of terminating human life, that was unprecedented. The first time that happened, that was World War I. And of course, that led people on a path of trying to, avoid anything like that, and trying to get also out of this very brutal conflict that, over the whole of Europe, kind of, it was a tremendous war, and so many different interests, right? Russia, again, Great Britain, Netherlands, Germany, Austria, the Jungo-Austrian Empire. It was just crazy. It was all over the place. It was a mess. People killing each other all over. And so, of course, people afterwards sought, after something that would give them peace of mind, like a future that would be less scary, a society that could be peaceful again. How can we achieve that? So artists were involved in kind of predicting the future. They were brought to the round tables. They were, searched after, sought after by the universities, and kind of, give us a new perspective. Now, what they believed back then was that, what did people in the past think the future would look like? Further to the above, some of the other interesting predictions from Victorian futurists include the following. I think there, in order to understand this really quickly, there are two types of futurists. Actually, three types. You had the Italian futurists, you had the Victorian futurists, and then you had the Second World War, post Second World War futurists. Yeah, it's truly a thing. Like the 50s, they had a different vibe. Also, when you look at the pictures, we will check out some of them, and the art that they were envisioning about the future, it had a way less Victorian type of impact in terms of their visions, of the things that they were, kind of prophesizing would in terms of how we would live and how we would use modern technology. So there was a Victorian way of seeing it, there was an Italian, the futurist way of seeing it, and there was a post-World War II way of seeing the future. These were the three main sector of the futurists. You could say that the 1920s and the 1950s, the futurists there, they were more like retro futurists, because the Victorian style is basically based on a revisiting, a re-elaboration of the neoclassic style, which in itself is a revisitation of the ancient Roman Greco style. So Roman Greco style was rediscovered in the Renaissance, the rediscovering in the 15th century by the Florentine masters, most of them, and the Venetian masters. And then we had the rediscovery of that epoch in the, in the late 19th century, 1840 it started, 1880, 1890 had its culmination, the Art Deco style, the libertarian French style, and then we had the culmination of all that brought together, which was the Victorian futurist style, right, of the 1920s, that Fritz Lang, Metropolis, Art Deco, Art Nouveau, all that stuff. So it's sort of, it's kind of a, building up process. So futurists per se were born actually in the Renaissance, in the 15th century, which is crazy. Like the movement, the philosophy is coming from the rediscovering, the re-elaboration, the revisiting of ancient Roman Greco culture. And back then they thought, this was the Victorian style, so that's the 1920 futurist. School children would be taught using headphones, direct assimilation of knowledge using technology. The firemen would be able to fly around to put out fires. The police would also have flying capabilities. We would be racing or riding aquatic animals for pleasure and transportation. Air taxis would be very common. We would also play sports underwater. We could walk on water using special footwear. We would be able to control the weather using technology. That's interesting. That's really fascinating. That's what they believed in the 1920s already. And from some of the future predictions from the past, you cannot fault them to the lack of imagination. It turns out most were hopelessly optimistic, while some were frankly crazy. However, no, crazy, really? However, some are eerily close to the mark, but even a broken clock is right twice a day. Here are some prime examples. Well, I don't think the coincidence holds up the case here. I think this is a little bit of infantilization of the achievement of these artists, right? We want to ridicule by making them small and saying, yeah, they were right sometimes, I guess. It's not that easy. There is work of Leonardo da Vinci, or what we think the person that once, was, or the academia, the school, the Leonardo da Vinci, trademark. It has been said that he constructed robots with mechanical gears and transmission that for, Louis, was it the 15th? No. It was one of the Louis, I think the 9th or so, right? It was 15th century. So that he constructed robot in the 15th century that could execute different movements, according to the transmission you were putting in, and by recharging it and then letting it loose, right? The robots like tigers and stuff, they could like perform, little acrobatics and little, postures and little moves, and then get back into their position. Pretty much what Sony is building now with a dog, right? With this artificial dog. Of course, this dog has a little bit more capabilities, has sensors and all that, and a processor, and can, elaborate data real time. But the basic mechanic foundation of that, and that I think is it's a contradistinction for Victorian futuralism, retro futuralism, if you want to call it so, right? It had something Victorian about it. It's always something mechanical. Where the Second World War, like the post-Second World War futurists, they were already up in the space. They were already thinking about rockets and space travel. So it's very interesting to see how people were trying to decode the future based on, on their environment, on their technological standard. But here you see that they envisioned that trains could transport like whole blocks. This is from Hildebrand's Deutsche Schokolade. This is from Germany. So I'm not really sure if this is like a futurist, because this is talking about this chocolate factory that was transported on train tracks with a double steam locomotive. Looks pretty. The German cocoa and chocolate company Theodor Hildebrand and Son, amongst other things, produced a series of collectors' postcards with their visions of the future. In this particular example, they foresaw a future where entire buildings or towns could be carted around on enormous carriages pulled by trains. Bewegliche Häuser im Jahre 2000. Wow, this is crazy. So they thought that by the year 2000, housing would be, you could move entire blocks and entire houses. Here, what is this in the background? Is this a Zeppelin? It looks a little bit like a Zeppelin with a crane function. Interesting. Very futuristic. Very interesting. So moving buildings is nuts. For people living in the United States, it's like, hey, we're practicing. And actually, as far as I'm concerned, I think the South Pacific World Fair, was it that one? There was one of those world exhibitions, I think on the West Coast it was, where they allegedly shipped a whole building. So, and then placed it there. I mean, I could look it up now, but it would a bit deviate from our original stream today, and we usually do that only on Tuesdays with my man Dragon Slayer Commentaries, because he is the professional deviator. I am not, so I won't do what he usually does every Tuesday, 6 p.m. It's a beautiful opportunity to check it out. Dragon Slayer Commentaries, he's the tangent king for sure. I mean, Ryan is a funny, sharp guy, but he is not a derailer, a professional derailer like Dragon Slayer Commentaries is. So I won't derail like he does. You can see him doing that in a magnificent way, like he always does, right? Every Tuesday on this channel, the COACHMC studio with Dragon Slayer Commentaries and Ryan Roger Athay. 3 Sages in a Time Machine. Tomorrow we will look at, it's something beautiful. It's an amazing topic tomorrow. You can't even, it's wonderful stuff. Please be there or be square. Okay. Yes, yes, Pat, you're right. Physically moving big objects still brings wonder to most people. Yes, and it always is like, how do you move that, right? It has been said that the city of Chicago, after the great earthquake, that they installed springs under all major buildings in Chicago, like huge metal steel springs. There are even paintings and drawings of that. There are no, I haven't seen any like real photos of the construction protocols or, you know, building logs or anything like that. But they claim that parts of the city of Chicago is built on steel springs. So how do you do that? Exactly in the 19th century? Please enlighten me. Also in the early 20th century, that's a really tricky thing to do. That's I don't know. But here you see a chocolate factory from Germany, kind of envisioning that already. The same chaps envision entire cities being roofed over to keep the rain out, like building huge domes, huge roofs, to protect them from lightnings and storms. Interesting. That was a prediction for the year 2000. The cities would be, protected by these gigantic roofs hovering over the cities. The very same chocolate company. I wonder what was in that chocolate, guys. This is something that Ryan would say right now. I mean, what kind of chocolate is that? That kind of inspires, futurist illustrators to kind of envision how cities would work. That you would build gigantic rooftops or, transport whole blocks from one part of this town to the other. It's very interesting chocolate factory. Willy Wonka is at it again, I guess. Here we have meet the Victorian Roomba. It's not the Broomba, it's the Victorian Roomba, right? So envision a robot, a mechanical device, a very primitive robot that could, mop the floor. Fascination with robots is a new thing. It's even 100 years ago. People were dreaming of mechanized helpers who could free us from the drudgery of mundane tasks like cleaning. The striking example by Anne Land 2000 appears to predict the existence of cleaning robots in our time. In the year 2000 was a French-produced series of predictions of the future were printed on paper, cigar box inserts, and collectible postcards at the turn of the last century. By the year 2000, people thought that moving sidewalks would be the norm, which would be like a horizontal escalator, right? Something that just, moves around and shifts around all over town. Again, it's from the same chocolate factory. Maybe we should do an episode just on the Hildebrand chocolate factory. Another visionary prediction from Theodor Hildebrand and Son is this bold idea. It's one that prized postcards. They envisioned a world where the very sidewalks of cities would move around, freeing inhabitants from the inconvenience of walking around. The ultimate inconvenience for some, this is another prediction that isn't that far off reality. As anyone has visited an airport recently will attest, their prediction is pretty accurate. In principle, they do sort of exist. Moving walkways do exist. Here is how a 1920s futurist predicted the apartments of the future. Everything is electric, sort of automated. Everything has a charge. Interesting. Oh. Look at this. Interesting stuff. Moving sidewalks. Everybody would move by air. Brooming robots, cleaning robots, roofed cities. So here we have a vision of the future by these futurists that gave us already the idea that, they were thinking about how the human context can sort of work with the corporate context, right? How can we bring them together and have a fulfilled living at the same time, giving them all the standards, the comforts that they need in order to function? So it was a system that was built on the idea that, both systems will sort of coexist and function off each other. And we are now kind of confronted with a reality that tells us something else. So in this incredible piece of work by Frank R. Paul from the 1920s, we get a glimpse of future living as envisaged almost 100 years ago. It's quite hard to pick out on the above image, but some of his predictions include electric light bookshelves, under-seat heating, electric pianos, electric ozonators and deodorizers in every room, electric cigar lighters, combination electric phonograph and radio telephone, electric window openers, refrigerators in every room, to name but a few. As you can probably already tell, this isn't far off from the mark. We pretty much do have most of these gadgets and appliances today. So these predictions actually turned out to be true. It's interesting that when you give an artist an idea and what he predicts, that this is more of, more coherent to what will actually happen than to what, here we have examples of these, 1920s distinctions. This is a great channel, The Future of the 1920s. Love this YouTube channel. And we have here some ideas of the 1920s. This is the Victorian style I was talking about. It's way more mechanical, as you can see, way more, it has this typical distinction. And this is more the, post-World War II style and the predictions that were made back then. People imagined that we would, also travel with these combined zeppelins, and that they would carry enormous volume of weight and cargo over the oceans. Beautiful stuff. But the thing is that what we have experienced after the Second World War, where people actually that we would live, in water cities, that we would travel. Pretty much everyone would have his own little rocket ship, that we would have these, train gliders that actually in Germany we have in one city called Wuppertal, and that's pretty much it. But they thought that after the Second World War, the contribution that technology would make would be way bigger and way more, impactful, and that our assimilation of it would be way faster. Now, what we have seen is more of a mechanical sort of, development. It's sort of in the 60s, we landed on the moon, and I think many people thought now there's going to be a huge leap forward. The way we're going to live, the way we're going to divide space, the way we're going to, take care of the climate. I think many people in the 60s, by the end of the 60s, after they saw, the man on the moon, thought, hey, this somehow will ignite, development and progress on this planet. And therefore, they definitely thought that now there is an era, there will be an era of prosperity and an outlook and profound change. And therefore, when, the 70s came around and people saw that, yeah, okay, so we landed on the moon and now what? And that nothing came out of it. If you really think of it, like nothing came out of that. I mean, we have what? A Teflon pan, which is, it's actually, DuPont didn't really, I mean, the story about the Teflon pan is not completely related just to space travel. So even that, you can even account that, NASA that for. So it's not just, it's not to criticize NASA or an agency, but what did we really, get from that experience that we finally landed on the moon? Because the expectations were super high. We thought that would kind of kickstart that type 1, type 2 civilization. And, of the, what is the scale, the Kardashev scale. And it didn't happen, right? And I think that backlash from that, that disappointment, that wave was truly big. And even though, of course, the 70s by many is a very creative period, nonetheless, it was also a very toxic period in a way, right? A lot of delusion, a lot of disappointment, a lot of, a lot of fighting and killing, and political leaders being assassinated, and, kind of masters of music dying and all that stuff. So the 70s were definitely way more gloomier than what people sometimes paint them, and were definitely a reaction to the disappointment of the 60s that promised so much. The buildup was so huge. The expectations were so big in the 20s, and in Italy with the futurists, and post World War, where everybody believed, like, yeah, also part, because of what came out of Germany was so impressive in terms of the war machine, the stuff that they produced. It kind of felt like they were coming from the future with some of these things. And that's why also there are still a lot of conspiracy theories about these technical advancements, and weapon developments, and also rocket developments. I mean, if we think about it, if we really think about the rocket that brought the man to the moon, was a German rocket, right? And somehow it kind of stopped there. It didn't really evolve the way people envisioned, or how it could potentially, or how potentially it could have, right? It sort of stopped in the 60s. Basically also because I think many perpetrators of that idea of the future, like Kennedy and Martin Luther King to a certain extent as well, but I wouldn't say necessarily him to be, call him futurist, but I think the presidency of both of Bob Kennedy as well, right, that didn't work out because he was killed, and of John Kennedy, that didn't work out because he was killed, and I think that stopped somehow progress in a way. I'm not saying that he's the perfect president, but I think he was on to really proving a point and really showing like what we're capable, really digging for the truth, and I think that definitely also put a break on development of this planet somehow. Here you can see one of those remaining gliding trains that were envisioned by the futurists of the 1920s to be, populating all sorts, all cities basically. This is like a hovering train, very old, and then of course now they're building newer cabins and coaches for it. But the system itself, I think it was built for the World Exposition in the late 19th century in Wuppertal, and it's still in function. It still works fine. Also, if you think about the city plan of every city, basically, right? This tram connection, everything electrified, the way the Victorian, classicist, neo-Renaissance buildings, that was all early 20th century. We pretty much stopped there. Then we ripped away all these tram tracks, right? All this electrification. We tore it down to build inner city highways to promote combustion fuel and of course car manufacturers, because they weren't a thing back then. People need to get to the jobs in a different way. So cities were actually constructed in a pretty healthy way. The infrastructure was working quite decently, and everything was electrified, and trams were kind of reaching out, even in LA, even in Frisco. Like, it's crazy. They were all over the world. And then they decided to go for cars pretty much all over the world. And this is when this type of electrification and the development of trams, of gliding trams, all that stopped. Again, it was for business reasons. Here we have another really fascinating article about a person that is, it's almost incredible. So here we have an expert about 1922 he lived. He was born 1882 and died 1926. W.L. George. And he was nothing short of visionary when he imagined the amazing and remarkable world of 2022. So he tried to imagine what the world would look like. And by the way, if you think about the book title 1984, that was the world that George Orwell, or his real name Eric Blair, envisioned what the world would look like after 100 years of the constitution of the Fabian Society. So he said in the 1884, that was the founding year of the Fabian Society, and George Orwell said by the year 1984, this is what they will have achieved. So that was his future prediction. That's why the book is called 1984. So this good sir, here are some of George's prophecies from over a century ago. I'm sorry, I was thinking of something. I suspect that commercial flying will have become entirely commonplace. The passenger steamer will survive on the coasts. What's wrong here? The article is gone. Hello, article. Thank you for coming back as soon as possible after this little commercial break. Thank you. The English author W.L. George resumes. I suspect that commercial flying will have become entirely commonplace. The passenger steamer will survive on the coast, but it will have disappeared on the main routes and will have been replaced by flying convoys, which should cover the distance between London and New York in about 12 hours. Right? Just short of 3 hours, but the Concorde did it in, I think, 4. But hey, it's not bad to start with. The people of the year 2022 will probably never see a wire outlined against the sky. It is practically certain that wireless telegraphy and wireless telephone will have crushed the cable system long before the century is done. Well, this has not aged well. And we know basically why. I think business has, kind of impeded the growth and the rapid development of wireless technology. Also something that, Tesla had envisioned. And we know that Tesla, somehow he was sabotaged, right? He said it multiple times. And even if not everything that he kind of came up with would have worked as flawlessly as imagined, it's still, he was a very visionary, also one of those futurists, right? One of those people that were looking into future. So this definitely aged bad, but I think he was right in terms of this is what technically was possible, but was then, by looking at the corporation, what was stopped as its development in order to monetize more out of the cable system. Because once you've installed a wireless system, there is no need for, maintenance. There is no need for reproducing that material. It's not scarce. So it doesn't make sense on in the capitalism way of looking at things. And therefore, this is why the cable is still here. And also because of, I think, other reasons that we will discuss in another episode where we're going to look into other topics. Coal will not be exhausted. What is wrong with me today? Coal will not be exhausted, but our reserves will be seriously depleted, and so will those of oil. One of the world dangers a century hence will be a shortage of fuel, but it's likely that by the time a great deal of power will be obtained from tides, from the sun, probably from radium and other forms of radial energy. While it may also be that atomic energy will be harnessed. That is incredible. And also, another thing for us to kind of observe, they always told us scarce, right? It's coal. It's going to be soon depleted. Oil. It's going to be soon depleted. It's going to be soon. You have to make people believe that something is running out in order to raise the price. Never forget that. It's like we can trace back the mining of gold on planet Earth almost conclusively to at least 250,000 years ago. We found gold mines in South Africa where you see professional, well-executed, structured work of mining gold, right? So there is no coincidence. There's no way of saying it another way. So for over 250,000 years, we are harvesting gold out of gold mines. And it's still there, right? They always tell us gold is scarce, right? It's scarce. So, we should, that's why it's so expensive. Diamonds are scarce. That's why they're so expensive. Oil. So could it be that there is a continuous production of gold, of oil, of coal inside of this planet due to the energy of the, of the torque of the system? We're, flying through the electromagnetic assumption of waves and the fields that we're traveling through, that this is some sort of a production mechanism, that this is some sort of a byproduct of the natural, that's the natural, result of our travel through space. This planet lives. It absorbs, digests, and produces. Absorb, digest, and produces. And yes, this planet absorbs cosmic rays, cosmic particles, dark matter, energy waves. It digests them, so it kind of, transforms them. And the planet, by transforming them, uses mineral and other proteins and other informations and other silica and carbon, and therefore these are the products that will result out of that. And this is what we're constantly doing. And I think this narrative that something is scarce is just a narrative. I don't necessarily believe it to be true. It's just a fantastic way of making money, right? Just hell, there's not a lot out of there. It's running out, right? Soon we won't have any more. And it's still there. So even 100 years ago already, there was a narrative, and we're still having enough oil. We're still not running out of gold, of silver, of diamonds and all that. So this may be also a good way of telling you guys, there is no such thing as a deadline, and there is no such thing as we're completely running out of something. They don't, The system always wants you to believe that in order to, to kind of drive the wheel of consumption further and further. Unfortunately, it's not a nice thing, but it's true. It's how the system survives. Telling us things that are not necessarily true, or they're overemphasized or over-dramatized in order to make us believe or have a certain tendency, and that will then give power to the reptilian center to kind of compensate for their frustration of being helpless and feeling sometimes senseless and not in control of the global scale of the situation. And therefore we compensate that with shopping sprees, right? With playing poker, with betting on games, with kind of trying to feel that control over the little things and feeling that dopamine rush that should console us for the lack of control that we have. But actually it's not true. We do have control. We do have absolutely control. The movies will be more attractive. As long before 2022, they will have been replaced by the kind phone, which now exists only in the laboratory. Interesting. That's 1922. That is, the figures on the screen will not only move, but they will have their natural colors and speak with ordinary voices. Many buildings now standing will be preserved. It is conceivable that the Capitol at Washington, many of the universities and churches will be standing 100 years hence, and that they will, almost unaltered, be preserved by tradition. Interesting. Naturally, the work of the household, which is being reduced day by day, will in 2022 be a great deal lighter. I believe that most of the cleaning required today in a house will have been done away with. In the first place, through the disappearance of coal in all places where electricity is not made, there will be no more smoke, perhaps not even that of tobacco. Interesting prediction. In the second place, I have a vision of walls, furniture, and hangings made of more or less compressed papier mache bound with brass or taping along the edges. Thus, instead of scrubbing its floors, the year 2022 will unscrew the brass edges or unstitch the tapes and peel off the dirty surface of the floor or curtains. It is conceivable, though not certain, that in 2022 a complete meal may be taken in the shape of 4 pills. This is not entirely visionary. I'm convinced that corned beef hash and pumpkin pie will still exist. Yes. Marriage will still exist. I found this one very interesting. It will still exist much as it is today, for mankind has an inveterate taste for the institution, but divorce will probably be as easy everywhere as it is in Nevada. The year 2022 will probably see a large number of women in Congress, a great many of the judicial bench, many in civil service posts, and perhaps some in the president's cabinet. But it's unlikely that women will have achieved equality with men. Interesting. New York Professor Ferdinand Schuler imagined Manhattan as a utopian metropolis of skyscrapers, moving sidewalks and canals instead of streets. It's very interesting. We see these pictures also resonating in AI, artificial intelligence, by Steven Spielberg. By the way, he wants to shoot a new UFO movie. I'm really curious what that's going to look like. He's definitely interested in shooting a science fiction movie, a new UFO movie. That's just recent news. A New York's professor predicted in 1922 that New York City would have glass towers, enclosed skywalks, moving sidewalks, electric trains, and luxury airships. Okay. New York scientist Charles P. Steinmetz, a proponent of electrical power, imagined a cleaner future after society adopted the chimneyless house by 2022. It is reasonably to expect that all the domestic and industrial work of the city, all locomotion and transportation will sometime be done by electricity, and that in not very distant future, fires and combustion will be altogether forbidden by law within city limits and dangerous and unsanitary, he noted. He also predicted that humans would harness the sun's energy. At present, I could imagine a great structure under glass of magnifying power which could concentrate the sun's rays, he said. But how the power which they would generate and which they contain could be stored, I'm not ready to say. So already in the 20s, they had a very interesting and very good idea of how society would evolve. They thought of it on many levels, many structures, and many components that came together in these mega cities and made us kind of, come together. There was a filmmaker from Germany, Fritz Lang, with his, futuristic movie called Metropolis in 1927, which is a very interesting date, by the way. So he was a German expressionist, again, an artist, science fiction silent film directed by Fritz Lang and written by Thea von Harburg in collaboration with Lang from Harburg's 25 novel of the same name, Metropolis. Also, look at these paintings, these Art Deco, futuristic, post-Victorian styles. Made in Germany during the Weimar period, Metropolis is set in a futuristic urban dystopia and follows the attempts of Freda, the wealthy son of the city master, and Maria, a saintly figure to the workers, to overcome the vast gulf separating the classes in their city and bring the workers together with Joe Fredersen, the city master. The film's message is encompassed in the final intertitle, "The mediator between the head and the hand must be the heart." 1, 2, 3. And believe it or not, the fact that we have a countdown for rocket launch is coming from that movie. They believe this, at NASA, they thought as, when do we launch the rocket for the Saturn V? And it is believed that Werner von Braun, who was, of course, also German, who was then kind of, naturalized as an American, kind of made that suggestion. It's like, why don't we do it like Fritz? And they said, what do you mean? Yeah, Fritz, it had a countdown. And so the rocket launches with the countdown. And so this idea of kind of, setting up these, these sky beams and having this countdown from 10 to 0 and then launch the rocket to kind of have that ritual, that is actually a German idea. By the way, the Saturn V, right? Very interesting name. It looks like every time we gave the idea to the artist how he would envision the future, we come out with way more accurate prediction. Again, it's very interesting to see that. So we have the future. These were like the Victorian futurists, like I explained today. Then, like before, I'm sorry, not today. Slightly, I'm slightly confused today. I don't know why. Maybe I'm happy. I'm just glad to see you guys. Hope you're enjoying the show about the future, how they envision it, and where we're going. And yeah, I'm just in a good mood. Work is nice. We're producing videos. You're watching content, and so I don't know. Yes. So, John, on a side note, Fritz is one of my favorite chess engines. Yeah, for sure. So Fritz Lang, also, if you look at the movie, it's a slightly disturbing movie, if you really think of it, right? You have the elite. This is the class that commands. You have the workers, the big mass, the big population. And Maria, of course, is the heart that sort of communicates. So if you have a Maria that sort of equilibrates things, all right. But if you don't have her, things go wild. And so this elite club up there kind of installed Maria as an android, like sort of a robot, into this working class. And so she would lead them to sacrifice themselves for this, for this big demiurge type of, Moloch type of being. And this is, it's very interesting that the workers really went into this gate to sacrifice themselves, this big Moloch that was eating them alive. And so this Amun-Ra principle, there's a lot of Egyptian, a lot of occult knowledge flying around metropolis. And Fritz Lang, it's very, very interesting person, and what he believed like future cities would look like, this complete deprivation of sunlight for the lower classes, these huge high rises that would make it impossible for sunlight to kind of hit the ground, where everything was flying and communicating, you know, with these networks, these channels and all that. Very, very interesting. Like there is some sort of truth to it, right? And this ritualistic way of supporting a system that is oppressing you at the same time, because it's the only system. It's also, this is like a truly dystopian look. It's one of those, one of these films that really influenced centuries of filmmakers, like literally centuries of filmmakers. And he brought on such a dark but nonetheless compelling and also hopeful message in a way, because in the end, yes, Maria, she is the heart. So it means that the Sacred Heart, le Sacré Cœur, right? This thing that we have, our last natural beat, that is our lifeline. As long as that beat is alive, there is hope. There is a solution. There is a probability that we will make it. There's hope for the future. There's a glimpse of silver lining there. And I like that. So the Italian version of that scientific utopia, now, this is a bit more interesting. This is a bit more going into that German dark aspect, right? Where, the future was only dictated by the so-called scientists also. And a group of Italian visionary artists declared war on civilization, We will explore that in a separate episode, because there's so much more to say. It's not just that there were just future artists. There were, like I said, there were some groups, shadow groups, secret groups also involved in this that were heavily influencing. It's not even a secret. Like, there's no conspiracy theory. If you look into the founding of Italy, go to Garibaldi's grave, go to his mausoleum, go to Mazzini's grave. You see the insignias, the symbols. They are all over the place. It was a complete, Freemason revolution that went on there. It was completely conducted by them. And the Italian branch of the Freemasonry is more a French, like it's Temple d'Orient, Temple d'Orient de France, I think. This is the official name. That's the center organization in France that coordinates one of the very strong Freemasonic branches in Europe. It is opposed by the Scottish Rite, by the way, and by the UGLI, the United Grand Lodge of England. So they were actually battling against each other. And there is also the premise of looking in history through the glass of, hey, where certain events triggered, conducted, or executed because there was some sort of a secret or more or less secret conflict between two ways of interpreting Freemasonry and the Brotherhood of the Freemason, like before even thinking of democracy and politics, like really thinking of how do I interpret my faith. And this is what many suggest that was actually going on, and a lot of these crises that hit Europe. And also these people here, the futurists, were involved and had big part of it. So they were thinking that, like futurists working now in the fields of future studies and foresight, these artists wanted to shape the future. But the goal of these two groups could not be more different. Futurists, they forecast how science and technology will change our lives and predict alternative paths by applying the best lessons of history to build on what exists now. Are we doing that? Are we building on the lessons from the past? I'm not really sure we're doing that. Maybe that's, the premise, but it's not really working out. And it's not also, it's not really enforced or supported, right? It's not really something that is truly wanted, like to understand the past. Actually, we're mystifying the past continuously. We're always putting a cloak of secrecy over the past and some sort of legends, right? In order to kind of maybe make it more appealing, or maybe conserve it and keep it away from true exploration. I don't know, but it's not learning from the past. It's actually by, cloaking it way more. The godfather of futurism was writer and poet Filippo Tommaso Marinetti, who lived from 1876 till 1944, who published the founding and manifesto of futurism on the front page of the French newspaper Le Figaro. Here you see have the Paris, the French-Italian connection, also bound, by these Freemason groups that were heavily collaborating with each other. Like Garibaldi was a Temple d'Orient member. Mazzini as well. We have alleged also links with other branches of the Freemasons that went into Greece, into Turkey, into Germany. Very interesting. Austria. So very, very, very stratified and diversified, strings of different currents of all these political, ideas and manifestos and philosophies that were popping up after the two world wars. So a mythical struggle had to be waged between the masculine forces of science and technology, represented by the sea, and the seductive feminine power of the stars that prevented civilization from advancing forwards. Interesting. Take up your pickaxes and wreck the venerable cities, pitiless. Art, in fact, can be nothing but violence, cruelty, and injustice. And we see that today, right? This is what, let's be violent, let's be cruel, let's rock them with injustice. Mariette saw science as a modern virile enterprise to be pursued at all costs, and technology as the instrument that would usher the world into sunlight with velocity and violence. We need to press them into this new system. A mythical struggle had to be waged, yes. Within a year of Marinette's sermon, the Italian futurist movement was born. Artists such as Umberto Boccioni, Antonio Santelli, and Luigi Figlia emphasized speed, energy, flight, industrial landscapes, and destructive violence in their paintings. The original manifesto was followed by a host of others on almost everything from clothing, food, and smells to wars and lust. We hurl our defiance to the stars, they declared. We will glorify war. They wanted to bring down the system and create their own new dystopia. Even the futurists, though, imagined the world governed by electricity. Their electrical fantasies, writes Poggi, take a utopian turn in their vision and evolve into an orgy of violence. They saw Italy as being fertilized by electricity, banishing hunger, poverty, disease, and work. Air temperature and ventilation would be controlled automatically, telephones would be wireless, and crops and forests would spring up at speed. But in this world of ease and plenty, fierce competition would arise over superabundant industrial production. War would break out, fought by small mechanics whose flesh resembled steel, deploying steel elephants and battery-powered trains from afar. They would wage a thrilling interplanetary war. Ooh, that's deep stuff, dark stuff, heavy stuff. The union of man and machine is central to futurist thought and is best defined in Marinetti's 1909 novel Mafarca, the Futurist. Mafarca is an Arabian king with imperialist ambitions who creates a mechanical son, Gazurma, or Golem, to be his immortal substitute. Carved out of oak and modeled on an aeroplane, Mafarca finds his coarse skin, square jaw, ribs of iron, and formidable metallic member alluring, and breathes life into his son with a lingering homoerotic kiss. But his creation devours him, a fate Macarthur has foreseen and desired so that he might be reborn in the immortal sun. Gazurma proceeds to rape and obliterate Earth. Wow. So romanticizing. Yeah, we tend to romanticize the past, which is nice, but it takes away the dirt. Yes. Yeah. You're absolutely right. We're romanticizing, mystifying, and absolutely taking away the realness from it. We fail to learn from the past because we only remember the good stuff, not the dirty stuff. Yes, and the dirt keeps the funk, like James Jamerson Jr., the legendary bass player of the Funk Brothers, the foundation band of Motown Records that for 13 years has played and created more number one hits than the Beatles, Beach Boys, Elvis, the Rolling Stones combined, right? And he said this phenomenal, formidable, incredible, but also unfortunately very tormented genius, James Jamerson Jr., he said, the dirt keeps the funk. If you eliminate dirt, you eliminate creativity. And I think we can slowly but surely kind of go into what I believe the future will look like. Now, we looked into the geopolitics and the geostrategists, what they believe is going to be fundamental for the next 10 years and next 15 and 20 years of development. We looked into what the predictions of these radical groups, partially radical, interesting artists and other political groups of the 1920s and the 1950s said. and how they envision it. Now, what do I believe is actually the thing that will drive everything? What are the mega trends for the future? What is really, if we could all be Nostradamus, right? Nostradamus, another guy, another interesting person that kind of, what was he famous for? He was famous for what? For predicting the future, kind of seeing what's happening. I'm sorry, I wanted to give you here better. Maybe it works like this. Yeah, here we got the good guy. That's Nostradamus in a bit, side angle picture. Is slightly weird. I'm sorry for that. Yeah, he created a business even 500 years after his death. We're still talking about him. Why? Because there's nothing more alluring than knowing what the future will bring to you. Back to the Future is built on this premise, right? The almanac, like knowing what sport, results will look like in the future. It's going to be an unpresentable treasure chest, an unbelievable treasure chest, a cornucopia of money that will rain down on you endlessly. So let's play Nostradamus. Let's look into the future. Let's, geopolitics aside, strategies aside, what will the future look like in 2050? So here we have something truly fascinating. This is by a great resource. It's simplylearn.com, and they give you all sorts of resources to learn, to improve, to kind of develop a product for yourself. And they ask themselves, future of work, what job roles will look like in 10 years? And will technology kill jobs and aggravate inequality, or bring in more significant work and healthier societies? This question has worried humankind ever since technological advancement took over certain manual jobs. The service of a clock keeper, film projectionist, switchboard operator, etc. were no longer required once we develop better technology. The question still remains as is, what will the future of work look like? And yes, we have the incumbent, of course, of what do we face today? We have AI. And what did the futurists say of the 1920s? We will have radium, right? Electricity. Now we will have... So there's always a new development that somehow will threaten the status quo, that somehow will take over, will be implemented, or somehow will have its saying in the course of, evolution of the humankind and its society. But will that lead to society to disappear as a whole or not function anymore? So far, we have seen that it's not the case. Even though some of these futurists kind of predicted things that, yes, they became true, but only for a small part of the planet. That is the beauty. Because, yes, you can make very educated guesses. You have a lot of numbers. You can see trade. You can see money. You can see energy, how everything behaves. But then you can't predict a single human being. That's the great thing. That's why I don't necessarily believe in these simulations that can tell us how the weather will look like in 30 years from now, because it's impossible. We are traveling through dark matter. We are saying as scientists, like, it's dark matter. We don't know what dark matter is composed of, what it actually is composed from, what the particles are that dark matter contains. And it makes up for 97% of reality that we're traveling through on a constant basis with 30 kilometers in a second. That means we're talking about 45 miles of distance that we cover every second of our existence, that we travel through uncharted, unknown, completely unknown territory. So how do you want to predict the weather when the equation is 97% against you of all the things that should be taken into consideration, but you simply can't measure it? So now you might go, yes, but all the, the radiation that goes on in dark space and that travels all around us, that doesn't affect all of it, that affects the planet. I'm not sure of that, because it's the fabric we are traveling through. These two things are not dislocated. We know we are all connected. It's not 19th century mechanical separation of of organic and inorganic, and what is metal and what is organic and flesh and blood, and what is it's just steel. There is no such thing, because we now know it's all based on cells. It's all based on atoms. We're all connected through energy. It's all vibration. So there is no such thing as a separation of the fabric and the traveler. The traveler is part of the fabric. So of course the fabric impacts the traveler. To which extent, we can debate about that. But if we are traveling at such immense speed for billions of years through a fabric that is unknown to us, because we simply can't instrumentalize it, we simply can't analyze it, we can't put it even down in numbers. So how can we predict the weather then on this traveler if 90% of the stuff that impacts the planet is still unknown to us? To a certain extent, it is impacting us, right? Sometimes more, sometimes less, but still, it does have its impact. So how can you take an equation and say, this is how the planet is going to look like, these are the taxes that you need to pay in order to fix the environment, where 97% of the equation is unknown to you? It's absolutely hypocrisy. It's ludicrous. This is why I don't necessarily believe in these simulations and these models and what they project sometimes. Because the stuff that is the most influential for the result of that simulation is not accounted for, is not placed into this equation, into this formula. So what the fuck are we talking about? You want to restrict my freedom based on data that is to 90% inconsistent, because you just can, base your regulation on 3% of knowledge that you actually have of the whole fabric? Now, first of all, discover reality to at least 75% and tell me what it is made of and how it impacts us, and then come back to me and tell me how my little contribution here, when I'm farting, eating, and kind of traveling, how that really, really impacts on a granular level the climate in 30 years from now. Which is completely also related to our today's episode, because this is what people keep telling us. It's going to look like this. This is about to happen. This is scarce. This is abundant. This is what you need to do in order to go into a certain direction. It's not true. There is no deadline to climate change, because we're always changing. We're changing on a daily, on a second base. On a second basis, we are changing our location. Change is the very fundament, the very fabric of our existence. I would say climate change is to say LCD display. That's like a double count, because LCD means already liquid crystal displays. Sometimes I hear ads though that say, yeah, it's a LCD display. That's like a double count. You're repeating the word. So to say climate change climate is already change. It's like change. Of course it changes. That's the very essence of our nature. We change. We have 3 stages of life. We have 5 stages of deterioration. We have 7 stages of evolution. It's always change. I'm sorry. I just went on a little rant. The amount of paper the office goes through in a week proves technology is subjective from what it will. Yes, absolutely. A recent science thing just revealed why water evaporates. They still don't totally understand. Yes, absolutely. Totally true. Technically, until the 40s, we didn't even know how the sun worked. We still don't know. The sun doesn't make sense on so many levels. Why is the surface hotter? Why does it expel water? There's so many questions. Why are the protuberances only happening in certain areas? Why are the sunspots not happening north of 19.47 north and south of the equator? There seems like so much stuff with the sun that we still can explain, that will tell us, yeah, nonetheless, it will extinguish in 4 billion years. Again, let's create a catastrophe setup to put people under pressure, even though we don't even fully understand the body that is supposed to, finish its existence, within the established time parameters. It doesn't make sense. Please explain first how the object works, and then you can tell me when it will expire its function. This really drives me nuts, because so many predictionists and futurists and all these people, like we also see some of them, the artist had way better tools of predicting the future, because he was envisioning more from a holistic, like a right hemisphere point of view, how society and everything would collaborate. If you look at the technicians, at the experts, at the scientists, they have a very narrow-minded view. They always part from what is technically achievable. They don't look at the human component and the irrational addition that every human brain potentially can achieve, something that is truly amazing. Like, if we truly believe that Leonardo was a single person, which I don't personally, that's my opinion. But let's say there was a guy like Leonardo da Vinci. Like, do you really believe that it's like only 500 years or so that someone like this comes up? We are all like that. We are all connected to the energy field. We're all connected to this universe. We all are able to kind of channel future pictures and visions. And there are many, many, kind of research papers on this subject that are truly mesmerizing and mind-blowing, and great books about that. So it is possible. It's just a matter of installing that culture and fostering that culture. Now, look at the culture that we're fostering today. What is incentivized? What gives money? Where do the industry, where do the companies go? Always go for the destruction. They always go for the deconstruction, for the destructive part of the energy field, if you want to call it so, of the creative field. And that, at a certain point, will endeavor and devour itself, right? It won't endeavor. It won't last at the task of time, because Kronos, Uranus eats Kronos, Kronos eats Zeus, Zeus eats Athena. They're always eating their own childs. The revolution eats its own kids. They won't survive. They will eat and cannibalize themselves. And this is exactly what we're seeing. Isn't that fascinating? So, 4 possible worlds of work in 2030. Price Waterhouse and Cooper's assessment, risk assessment, and value assessment company, pretty powerful, sees 4 alternative worlds of work. 4 alternative worlds of work, all named after different colors. Interesting. One world could move away from big companies as new technology allows small businesses to gain more strength. And another, companies might work together for the betterment of society as a whole. Let's have a look. So the red world. Here, technology will allow tiny businesses to tap into the vast reservoirs of information, skills, and financing. HR will no longer exist as a separate function, and entrepreneurs will rely on outsourced services for people processes. There would be fierce competition for talent, and those with in-demand future skills will command the highest rewards. And we will get to those in-demand future skills, because we're getting to the boiling point of this episode, guys. Please stick with me, because it's truly mesmerizing stuff that is coming up. This has been nothing so far. The blue world. Here, global corporations will become larger, powerful, and more influential than ever. Now, welcome to hell. Not necessarily. That was a bit polemicized. I'm sorry. It's not true. I don't believe that companies are all inherently evil. If you have a debt system that is based on interest rates and central banks printing money out of thin air, then yes, companies will remain evil. Starting from a certain scale, starting from a certain magnitude of their volume. But if you actually work around that system, and we will also get to the point of how we could do that potentially in the future, abolish central banks as we envisioned them in the early 20th century. Again, everything we are having as society right now is coming from that era, guys. It's all post 2 world wars that created most of the philosophy that is accountable for the process, the evolution, and the results that we are experiencing right now in 2024, which is absolutely crazy. Still, there's nothing new under the sun. So the green world, as a reaction to strong public opinion, scarce natural resources, and strict international regulations, companies will push a strong ethical and ecological agenda. We're seeing that too. The yellow world is the 4th pillar of that future work world. Here, workers and companies will seek out greater meaning and relevance. Workers will find autonomy, flexibility, and fulfillment while working for organizations with strong ethical and social standards. The concept of fair pay will predominate in the future of work, even though I don't know what fair wage is. So what is the future of work? 10 key trends for the next 10 years. So we have this red world, where we have technology being implemented by smaller companies. And this is something that we're also saying on Saturday Night Hypnosis every now and then, where we're talking about the future of entertainment, comic books, and all that, where I say that, Actually, last Saturday, episode 95, 94, guys, we have 95 ahead of us. Incredible. But in episode 94 on Saturday Night Hypnosis last time, I talked about that we already won the war. You know, we don't need to see the companies being our enemies or to see these multinational super megalists to be the equivalent of the empire, right? And the emperor being Larry Fink or the Rothschilds or anything like that, and kind of oppressing us. There is no war anymore. We already won. The internet has won. Information has won. The truth has won. They are not saying it because, of course, the media companies belong to them, and they will never admit that. But the numbers, the holy numbers for those corporations, for their accounts, for these banks, you know, the system. There are another 70 banks that will declare bankruptcy in this year. There's trillion of debts running around in all our systems. Governments are crushing to the ground. Companies are not, you know, firing thousands of employees. Why is that? It's because of us, because of the realization that we created a new subsidiary economy, a new ecosystem that is impenetrable because it's based off internal laws, on cultural laws, on values that are ethical, educational, and creative, where we have created a complete new system, a biosphere where they now desperately want in with all the measurement, even forcing themselves in, but it's not working. They're trying it with their woke agenda. They're trying it with restrictional laws. They're trying to kind of offend us in all ways, to kind of trigger a reaction, to have a reason to kind of put more taxation or more stuff upon us. Because, of course, if they control the narrative, they control our actions, and therefore they can react and propose a solution that is convenient to them. But if we don't react anymore because we don't need to, because all of a sudden we have control over creation, this is what we talked about last Saturday night, then there is no war anymore. The war is just mental, guys. It's a semantic war. It's really believing. Why do you think politicians always tell you, oh, the war on drugs is not over? Of course it's not over. They don't want it to be over, because that would mean that there's a solution. War brings money. It's business. It's corporations. It's money. It's power, right? So if you wage a war on whatever it is, then it's not the solution, right? So semantics already kind of put you into that mental cage. Step out of that mental cage and realize that there is no war. It's them who want a war in order to, you know, kind of trap us in the system of conflict, of perpetual, never-ending conflict that we should have with ourselves, with our identity, with our sexuality, with our faith. You know, this is all, you know, kind of induced and injected by the system. This is not us wanting. We don't have conflicts per se. We want to create and compete. We want to elaborate, improve, and evolve. We want our peace of mind, all that, and everything that kind of threatens that. Yes, of course, that could be a conflict, but that is that's an organic conflict. It's not an induced, artificial, injected conflict. And so the future will be dictated by those who can separate themselves from the agenda, who see that there is no war, that we have won already. If that makes sense, right? Because we now, with blockchain technology, you know, Monday is also a bit of a blockchain day, where we talked last time. Please check out that video. That is like the future of creativity, I think I called it, or future of art, or the future of the artists. Yeah, it's on the channel. That video shows you how blockchain technology will enable artists to create an ecosystem for themselves that is also not only the distribution and the manufacturing, but also the financing, where we as a whole, as artists, as a community, as a collective of creators, can completely, you know, detach ourselves from the traditional banking system and still purchase all the things we need to without being dependable on their debt inflationary doomsday system that doesn't make any sense anymore. And it has completely outdated itself, like Swift, like all these payments, like the banks itself, like, you know, they've been the past futurists. Now we are the futurists. Now we are the present futurists. We don't need their system anymore. We need it in another way. It doesn't mean that we need to burn it down. It just has ceased to exist as a global solution. Some people will still go to it because they feel it more comfortable. But this red world, this is what we talked about last Saturday. I think this is going to happen for more and more people. Like small businesses coming together, use information and technology in order to, you know, kind of bring themselves to the customer. This is what we're seeing today, and this is fierce. Like on YouTube, we have YouTube creators. It's not enough to create videos. You have to create your merchandise. You have to create your master program, your master classes, your webinars. You have to create all these outlets in order to compete, in order to gain more traction. Of course, that's fierce, but it also forces you to work on your product, to improve, to implement continuously, get the right people, collaborate, all that. That is GDP. When money travels fast and you create economy for yourself. Check out that video, The Future of Artists, on my channel, guys. Explains so much about where, tiny businesses will go into the future as well. This blue world with a global corporation, yes, in the cities probably that's going to be true. Like big cities will be dictated more and more by corporations. I believe that. The green world, that is like, again, that's also a niche. And yes, but of course there is like a creepy, dark, and very, suspicious side about telling people that you have to live in a certain way to respect the climate, right? Because again, all these projections about the climate change, the simulations about weather, it's all based on data. And that data is flawed. And besides that, it's flawed, and the proposition of, processing it is it's just a ridiculous problem. You just can't add up stuff and carbon, besides the fact that we need carbon, right? Like plankton needs carbon. We are carbon-based systems, so carbon is not all that evil. But you can't just add out carbon and then say these are the trees that will be dead, and this is what was. It's just very naive, very, very naive. Yes, it gives an indication, but it's not enough to kind of force us into a law, in my opinion. And so the yellow world, workers and companies will seek out greater meaning and relevance, where you have like, a bit more ethical companies where people treat each other differently. Also, that is a trend that we're seeing more and more, where CEOs have a way more relaxed way of seeing and directing their company, where it's all not always, liquidity driven, where you have a little bit more of stability, maybe not like exponential growth, but more safe growth, all that. So who will be the providers for these 4 economic trends of the future, for these 4 global trends? There will be places to work, first of all. Quiet areas, you can go there, you will work. You have smaller individual organizations. There will be smaller corporations. There will be less hierarchy. There's a big emphasis on wellness, of course, making those workplaces more habitable, more like a nicer atmosphere, sure. Flexible floor plans, more modularity. Goodbye desk, right? There is no desk anymore. There won't be any physical desk. Employees will just park themselves anywhere and have simulated offices before their eyes. That's why worked so well in the beginning. Your robot assistant, all workers, all levels will be using robotic helpers, AI, Siri, Alexa, and whatnot. Render, great technology that Apple is using already. Smarter brainstorming. Most meetings will take place. It will be opener, in terms of communication. The virtual water cooler and formal get-togethers will take place via virtual and augmented reality headsets. Yes, you don't have to always travel that much. You can, be in multiple places during the day with these augmented reality devices. But what are the mega trends in job roles? Only 1 in 5 workers is in current jobs and will shrink in the future. Occupations related to agriculture, trades, and construction, which in other studies have been forecast to decline, may have pockets of opportunity throughout the skills ladder. Exactly. Again, everybody thought that agricultural trade is over. Everybody thought by the 1990s that everything will be just roboted and automated, and that agriculture will lose. And it's actually quite the opposite. Vinyl, everybody thought that vinyl will die. It's actually quite the opposite. There is a need for doing things by hand in order to give them a spirit that will never extinguish as long as we're alive, because we know that product, whatever product that is, like if you think of Taoism, right? Everything can be inhabited by a spirit if it's created by a spirited being. So even a robot can feel something human if he's completely created by a human, because a human has feelings. So therefore, there will be a fragment of that feeling also in the robot. And that is true for everything. There will be spirit in everything that we do with love and with the right dedication. So what are the skills that we need? This is McKinsey Global Institute research report that has highlighted that the top 3 skill sets workers will need to secure the best careers for the future. These most in-demand skills for the future are higher cognitive. These include advanced literacy in writing, critical thinking, and quantitative analysis and statistical skills. Doctors, accountants, research analysts, and writers use these, but not only, also artists, also creative people. Everybody who needs to communicate. If you have advanced literacy in writing, informing people, driving people forward, being a think tank, being an impulse giver, even though I hate the word think tank, but in a positive way, this is truly like crucial skills for the future. Social and emotional, these include advanced communication, empathy to be adaptable, and the ability to learn continuously. Business development, programming, counseling require these skills, coaching as well. These jobs are also amongst the best careers for the next 10 years. Technological, of course. That means people who can adapt, people who can think outside or at the edge of the box, people who are able to bring the dots together, who connect strings that are different, to amalgamate and conduct at the same time. These are the people who are the conduit of the future evolution, who are the conduits of that creativity that is necessary. And then all that, art, performance, entertainment, that will never disappear, will actually have way more value, because all these more specific and more fragment types of work environments, societies, and cultural ways of living that will be more or less prevalent in different societies around the world, they will need, like the futurists of the 1920s, like the futurists of the 1950s, like the futurists of the 1880s, and of them before, from the Renaissance period, the Leonardo da Vinci's, the Nostradamus, they will always need these soothsayers. You know that the Vatican, Vaticus, what does it mean, the Vatican? Vatican comes from Vaticus, which is actually Etruscan in its root. But in the Latin translation, it means soothsayer, somebody who is a bridge, who looks into the future. It's the Pontifex Maximus. It's not only conciliating or reconciling the spiritual and the physical world, it's also reconciling the present and the future world. So everybody is his own pope in the future, the leader of his own faith. And that doesn't mean that we're all godless. And it means that the individual acceptance that we are belonging to a certain niche, to a certain group, that we're certain collaborative structures that we will entertain for the rest of our lives, because this is what's most natural to us, to our inclinations, to our interests, to our skills. That will be like the ecosystem, our little chamber we will be in. That will we proceed and earn. And similar to what happened to maybe like Italy and Germany in the 17th and 18th century, where all these little prefects and precincts and all these little state inside of the states, it will be similar to that, where everyone has its little currency, its little ecosystem, and all kind of, have trade with each other. The amount of I'm sorry, we had that. Oh, I thought Pat had written something new. Now, let's get to another report. That was by McKinsey, which was already truly interesting. But let's get to, I think to the real smoking gun here. Because I think we can't even realize how big and how interesting and how enormous this new society will be that we will have by 2050. So many societies will become cashless in the future. This is by stackspayments.com. These are payment solution companies that are looking at history of currencies, of payments, and how money kind of changed its role and how it changed also the role of society. Because of course we need to look at the financial aspect of all this, because it will be still a factor. It won't be as important as it is today. It would be just kind of the the propeller. It's the lubrication for our future society. It won't be the thing that we're striving for. It's the product that we create as a natural byproduct that then lubricates the system itself. So it's just keeping the status quo. It's not the main focus point. It's not the main point of attention for our future endeavors, how it was still, and it somehow still is. That definitely will change. Money makes the world go round. There is no denying it. It's fundamental to modern life, whether for having a place to live, buying food, or purchasing goods or services. While it may not have think about it, how we use money today is vastly different from how we did millennia, centuries, or just decades ago. Exactly. That has changed radically. Today's concept of money began with our ancestors bartering and directly trading items and services as a medium of exchange. Then it was around 640 BCE in China, to the best of our knowledge. That can be debated in a Three Sages and Time Machine episode. The transition was eventually made to paper currency, which still exists today alongside various digital currencies and payment systems. It's clear that how we use and relate to money evolves dramatically over time. In a world increasingly driven by technology, it's a fair question to wonder what the future of money holds and how to best adapt to it. While we're not fortune tellers here at Stacks, here are our top 4 predictions of what the global economy and society's relationship to money could look like in the near future. So, many societies will become cashless, number 1. It's already becoming, true. Like, we're using plastic and cryptocurrency is going to do the rest. So, NFC, contactless payments, on the rise. Nobody believed that to be possible the way it is already playing out, and this is just the beginning of a development that's gonna be like I think just catapulted with enormous speed through blockchain technology also into the future. Like, it's gonna be all digital. Everybody's gonna have his own little currencies, and I think we can even start to understand like how much it's gonna be of importance, like to deal with these new technologies also on the basis of what is the currency, how can I trade, how can I exchange, right? It's already disrupting the market. Bitcoin is already disrupting the market, but also Ethereum, smart contracts, the way we're trading already is changing through blockchain technology. So definitely that's gonna play its role. Yeah, it will become mainstream for sure, like this article suggests. There's no doubt about it. So governments will offer a central bank digital currency. We know what that means. It's not always positive because they want to control our inflows and outflows. But digital currencies have also very good aspects. They are safe, easy to carry around, and if central banks can exchange digital currency for retail on retail levels, or for cross-border payments, or to settle like institutional payments between each other on a government level, then they become super useful because they eliminate friction out of the payment system between governments. And you can't even imagine the delays on an administrative institutional level sometimes happen with payments. And so that could take away a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of friction, and give immediate access to funds and to projects and to the refinancing of certain sectors of our official life and of our administrative branches. So definitely CBDCs have a very dark and like Orson Welles type of, not Orson Welles, George Orwell type of aspect to them, 1984. But they have also a very positive. If we take out that it could be on a personal level, like giving us, bringing it down from the top to the base level, just as a control mechanism, then of course it's bad and it's evil, right? And we should fight against it. But if they keep CBDCs, digital central bank digital currencies, for their own retail and their own settlement and their own trade and institutional payments and administrative payments, then it's actually an incredible thing that could help us a lot to be smarter, more leaner, and quicker as a society. So they have some positive aspects to them as well. it's going to be money management is going to become fully digital. And this is also going to be great for governments. If you can rely on a blockchain, for example, that completely calculates and gives you all the models that you need on real life data that is accurate and proven, then you have an administrative, accountant system that is way, way cheaper, faster to run, and more effective in its results and its solution. So again, blockchain is going to stay. It's going to be implemented. Of course, it will have also its less positive aspects, but definitely it's going to help us to make a leap forward as well. I'm 100% convinced of that. Also for artists, we showed that also with our last episode. Again, check it out, The Future of Artists, where we explain how blockchain will be also crucial for the distribution, payment of art, and making and production of entertainment, and be fundamental for creative heads like us. The World Economic Forum, of course, also be not one of the most loved societies and kind of clubs out there, associations that is not specifically loved by everyone, right? But even they are saying in many articles that the people that will be adaptable, that will be creative, that will have the resources to go in quickly, go out quickly, and change and improve and add always something to their skill set. These will be the people that will be part of that new world. Oh, that sounds really dark. No, but that new society that is about to shape in front of our eyes. And so, Pat, blockchain and crypto can go many ways. Internet investigators like Kovzilla will be, yes, like investigative journalism is not happening in mainstream anymore. Again, of course, because it was built for propaganda reasons after the Second World War, and therefore it had its peak in the 60s and 70s, and then they eliminated them quietly, kind of pushed them back. But investigative journalism is gonna be done by us, by the internet, by the independent researchers and journalists, and there will be more and more independent branches of economy doing their own work and kind of self-regulating and making sure that the space is always gonna be a healthy and genuine space, right? Where we won't have the necessity anymore to tap into fields of financing that would that would lead us to making compromises with the system that we don't want to. We will have those separated worlds of economies, of culture, and of creativity, where everybody kind of lives in its own galaxy, in its own universe, where its finance are completely separated from my finance. And we're seeing that already, guys. Actually, isn't today the 9th? Or is it the 10th already? I think it was yesterday when the International Petrodollar Act was officially terminated. So the Saudis, they are officially not. They don't need to list oil only in dollars anymore, right? They now can use any type of currency to trade their oil, to trade their crude oil. So the new era is already ushered in. We have the BRICS nations that are becoming more and more, where they're thinking about creating their own currencies and splitting up from the old dollar system, the reserve system that is made of central banks and inflation and debt and interesting rates and thin money that is created out of thin air. All that is already changing. It's right in front of our eyes. If we don't acknowledge them, don't perceive that, then we're blind, or we make an effort of not seeing it. But that is, of course, that is foolish. We have to realize that we are already part of this development. So rather accept it, get educated, get informed, and try to understand how that future is going to look like. Blockchain, one of those futures. BRICS nations, one of those futures. Single, decentralized economies, one of those futures. Outlets of creativity, service providers that are multifaceted, multi-eclectic, that provide for many different outlets, that are working as brainstorm units for different occasions, for different job applications, for different companies, to give them input, that are kind of traveling all over the place. Is basically what the COACHMC studio is already doing for 11 years. we are working with lawyers as much as we are working with architects, as much as we're working with yoga teachers, classical composers and singers, actors, of course, performers, entertainers, writers, authors. We're working with all sorts of people. There is no one type of the COACHMC studio client. Why? Because we believe in that adaptability and that general application of real creativity. And I break it down in those 4 pillars. Everybody can learn that on readytoperform.com. So if you happen to be interested in being part of the future and you want to be a dominant player in that and kind of understand how you can play a part in this and still enjoy your freedom, still enjoy your liberty, and still kind of propose something unique, then come over to readytoperform.com and hit me up with a direct message. And so we could start a creative adventure, whether you're an actor, a performer, a writer, whether it's about auditing your material, spicing up your portfolio, dusting off your toolbox, or inserting a new weapon into your armory, into your arsenal. It's there. It's right in front of you. Just type it in and get in contact with me. Let's set up a free discovery session over here at the COACHMC studio. We tackle all problems with a creative, optimistic outlet. We always try to find the solution. There, as long as there's life, there is lifeline. There is no deadline. There is lifeline. There is creativity. There's always a way of getting around, of tackling the boulder and understanding by overcoming that hurdle who you really are, because the process is the way is already the final result. The result, the trophy, the paycheck, the finished product, that's a byproduct. Of course we want that, but that's just the excrement, the natural, that's what we leave. But the process of getting to that excrement, that is the valuable portion of it. You get the idea, right? No, but truly, that is what makes us valuable. How can we charge an artist? Like, we charge him or we value him like he charges, or he gets valued or appreciated in terms of his experience. Like, look at what he did. Look at his portfolio. Look at what he is. So if you're interested in being part of that and creating art, being creative and being part of that movement, just join us. Absolutely. Also here with our free masterclasses. Tomorrow, 3 Sages in a Time Machine. Next Open Class Doodle is going to be on, not Monday. It's going to be on Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tomorrow, we're going to dive into history. We got a great episode ahead of us. And yeah, I just hope you enjoyed this session, guys. I just and hope you enjoyed this hopeful look into the future, this glimpse with positive sensations into the future, even though now it seems a bit dark and confusing and we're on the verge of many things, but we will always be. Don't get fooled by the narrative. It's always going to be change. It's always going to be the next incoming sensational or bad thing. It's always going to be the next. Quiet, safe, concentrated, focused, poised, and relaxed and confident. This is how you should tackle all these voices, all these noises, all these different, outlets of negativity and all that. Is like, let them be. Let them say their things, but don't believe the hype. Work on your product, work on your core information, make yourself more valuable every day, and you will see there is a pocket of hope. There is a pocket that is just there for you. There is a niche of the market. There is a blue ocean that you can explore without having to feed into the bloody competition, right? And making and turning your hours into money. There is no need for that. Turning creativity into money, that is a way better concept, in my opinion. Interesting that you combine people like what Kovzilla does with journalism, but it's a very accurate description of what it is. Analyzing blockchain will be a very valuable skill for sure. Yes, absolutely. Like using all, like I said, this is going to be like a combined effort. And somehow we will also help each other in this process for sure. But it's like we're going to be multi-eclectic, multi-interoperable, decentralized skill makers of the future. There will be no one thing that we will do. It's all being somehow combined. I mean, look at a YouTube channel in its essence, that's already there. How many great research investigation has been done on YouTube by YouTubers where you wouldn't never think of that they would actually do that, because it's sort of, it kind of propels itself. Excellent show as usual. Thank you so much, Pat. I had a lot more to comment on, but I'm half driving, working. My truck doesn't drive itself. That's it's a very smart comment. I would never allow my truck to drive me, right? I would always have, I would rather have control over my truck. So therefore, I appreciate you for coming by and listening to me while you were driving. I hope I gave you some company and some food for thought. And John, Coach, thank you for sharing. It's always a pleasure. See the three amigos tomorrow. For sure. Thank you so much, John Doe, for coming out. Yes, guys. Creative community also on Facebook, on YouTube, on X. It's great you guys stopped by. How society would look like in 2050. Maybe we gave you a couple of clues. And yeah, creativity as future currency is definitely going to be one of those PowerPoint positions, right? That we're going to hold in our bastion in our fortress of fantasy that we will never give up for no reason. Thank you so much. Please like the stream. Tell it to a good friend that we're here, that we're doing this. Check out our other videos. If you have any questions, contact me just directly on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. See you tomorrow with the 3 sages. It was absolutely fantastic being here and giving you these news. Future looks bright. Future looks good. And now, yes, you know it. You're ready to perform. So go out there and perform.